Many thanks for staying with us. Don't forget, this is a new day on Signature Television, and we're going to be discussing Nigerian government policy and international investment. And of course, in the studio is Dr. Stan Ukeje. He's an economist and development policy analyst. Good morning, Dr. Stan, and thank you for joining us this morning.
I'm happy to be here.
Absolutely. So let's just delve into the matter for the day. We're talking Nigerian policies and how it's possibly would affect investment, foreign investment. So we'll just take one policy at a time and then we dissect them. Let's start with not really a policy, but the recent political happenings, especially in Rivers State, the emergency rule. As an economist, how do you see the emergency rule affecting investment, not just locally in Rivers State, but nationwide? And also, how do you see it affecting international investment in Nigeria? Are there any direct correlations?
Well, Nigeria has never been a stable country for a long time. Therefore, instability has been part of the country's system. Nevertheless, instability can be heightened. I think the first heightening was by the Supreme Court that directed the central bank not to transfer
Allocation.
dues to River State. That is like abolishing the constitution. Because River State, like all other states, to different degrees, contribute to what is called the distributable pool account. In other words, taxes collected by the federation on behalf of everybody. On behalf of everybody, like the oil revenue. Okay. The oil revenue is assumed to belong to the whole country because minerals, it doesn't belong to the federal government. So I don't see how reasonable it is to say, do not give them their share. It's not reasonable.
Okay.
And in any case, administratively, it is not the responsibility of the central bank to give the money to the River State. It is the Revenue Mobilization and Allocation Committee. Because River State is represented on that committee, like other states. The central bank is just a visitor there. When the money is allotted, because it controls the banking system, it transfers. So if the central bank was truly independent, it will either ignore the ruling or challenge it. Because if the money has been allotted and the central bank is directed to transfer, it cannot withhold. But if in a federation, the High Court, because that is what the Supreme Court is, the High Court of the Federation, directs that a participant should not share, then you have abolished the federation.
Okay.
You get what I mean?
Yes, sir.
Yeah. Maybe Fubara should have challenged that judgment as a state. In other words,
I know you're not a lawyer, but just to paint more picture into our discussion, bring more color into our discussion, how would Governor Fubara, how would he have, challenged, the judgment of the Supreme Court? To
yes,
what authority would he take his?
He could have challenged it because
application to
the River State, as a state, has a right to sue all the states of the federation, including the federal government, at the Supreme Court, and it will be given priority. The issue he should have raised, or the Attorney General of the state should have raised, is what does it mean to withhold allocation?
You mean what are the implications of withholding?
No, he said, what does it mean? Does it mean that we are expelled from the federation? If we are expelled, very well. We were part of Eastern region of Nigeria that had self-independence in 1958. So we will take off from there and belong to ourselves. I mean, the Supreme Court would have reasoned differently. Secondly, this constitution itself says that nobody should control the government of the federation except as required within the constitution, in other words, by election. So there is no way that you take a part of the federation and impose somebody on it other than through election. you have violated. It's treason. But the truth, that's why I say the country has been unstable. And to solve that instability, in 1972, as Chancellor of the University of Lagos, late Nnamdi Azikiwe suggested that we should operate a diarchy. Because if it was, say, the United States, and Trump directs that, because New York has been challenging that Vance, the vice president, should now be the administrator.
Yeah.
The U.S. military will not go to the governor's office in New York to impose Vance. They will not, because you have to issue a directive in writing. It's not that there was a meeting of Security Council and all that kind of things. The president has to write, and when he writes and it violates the Constitution, the military will not follow it. But here you find that like late Salihu Ibrahim, who was the #1 cadet in the Nigerian Defense Academy, when he was retiring as Chief of Army Staff, he said that the Nigerian Army has become an army of anything goes. Even the vigilante that you have on the street, you don't tell a vigilante to go to somebody's house and break it because you are the chairman of the vigilante committee. The vigilante will ask you, what for?
All right, Doctor, what do you see, or what should you say would be the economic consequences or fallout? What would be the economic fallout, or consequence of this emergency rule in Rivers in terms of their IGR, or in terms of whatever economic implication?
I mean, if you have removed the Commissioner for Finance, for instance, the Director of Internal Revenue may be wondering what happens to him in Rivers State. Some people who are due to pay their taxes may not pay. And if you are an employee of that directorate, you can go to somebody and make a deal and collect money from him and tell him not to pay. Because that is what happens when there is instability. Anytime an army invades a place, there is looting. It can happen in different forms. The government stops operating. I'm sure you would have followed the drama of the former head of service. When such a thing happens, even the people in the civil service will spend their time watching TV. They say, see our girl, see the wife. That is lost time. Nobody will be working. And the administrator has appointed a full-time military officer as his chief of staff, a commodore. I mean, that's military rule.
So what do you call this, where there is a civilian and military administration running side by side? What do you call it?
It was the kind of thing that Babangida was running. He was a military officer. He announced himself president without any particular decree. Then Nwodo and Ezife and others were elected. And suddenly he annulled the election of Chief Abiola. And then his friend Abacha came in and sacked all of them. So I wouldn't be surprised if maybe in the run-up to Anambra State election, they will try to kidnap Professor Ludo as they tried to do Ukeje, in order to win the election. It's terrible.
Okay, so let's move over to another bill. It's called the CBI. I don't know if you've heard of the bill, the CBI bill, Citizenship by Investment. I think it has passed the second reading in the House. It's about to be passed. And they are saying that they want to give citizenship to foreign investors just to lure them to come and invest in Nigeria. What do you think? What do you make of that bill, and how feasible, is that strategy to invest foreign investors, given what is obtainable politically and otherwise in Nigeria? Well,
when there's instability, people who invest are risk takers. Broadly, there are two kinds of people with attitude: risk takers and risk avatars. The risk takers are already in Nigeria. If you listen to Alhaji Dangote during the launch of Babangida's book, he said that Babangida liberated the private sector. Whatever it means. That before him, that Nigerian businessmen used to apply for license through Indians in Nigeria. I mean, he said it on live television. That shows you that the foreign investors who want to take risk in Nigeria are already here. The gentleman who owns high-tech construction company that was given Lagos Calabar Coastal Way, he's already in Nigeria. I mean, he's holding Nigerian citizenship. He didn't. He knew that this place is highly risky, and if you want to take risk, there's maximum benefit for you.
High risk, high returns.
Of course. Yeah, you throw in what you have and take about what you have. But his children hold U.S. citizenship. So when they get money here, they transfer it there. So no reasonable person will come to Nigeria to hold investments. I mean, we used to have foreign investors here, those who came under the British flag. Many of them have left. Can you still see USC, PZ, all those? There were people who are doing business according to law.
So you're saying this bill is dead on arrival? It's not going to yield any?
No, I think they're just doing copy and paste. They had that US, Trump had issued an executive order proposing that people will pay a high sum of money to get a visa and automatically. But because they are looking for people who want to invest, it's part of his trade tactics. But if you go to the US, you have electricity, you have water supply, you have security. If you come here and on the day you are arriving, somebody was kidnapped, a hotel was on fire, but there was no fire service, will you come there? So it's just copy and paste. And in any case, the regulations by the National Assembly every time put a lot of money in a reform of the Constitution. So the Deputy Senate President and the Deputy Speaker of the House, they enjoy a lot of latitude. So they can just keep wasting time doing things that will not pass, even a primary school children will not vote for it, just to spend the money.
All right, let's talk about the tax reform bill. In my own assessment, I would think that is the most controversial in the country, currently, the tax reform bills. What are your thoughts on the way that the bill has been presented or has been debated on? What are your thoughts on its impact on the economy of Nigeria?
Well, nobody sets up a business or nobody goes into employment to pay tax.
Nobody does?
No, you go into employment to earn income.
To make money?
Yeah.
Okay.
The tax is incidental on your effort. And if the tax becomes higher, because if it penalizes your effort, you reduce effort. Let us assume that a transporter has capacity to carry 50 passengers. And when you carry 50 passengers, you pay X. If you see your friend on the road and ask him to enter when the bus is already full, because of that one person, you are asked to pay 2x, you will not carry your friend. In other words, you will reduce effort. It is normal everywhere. And Nigeria does not even have the capacity to collect taxes. Inside that bill, there's a provision for the government to farm out tax collection. In other words, it is called tax farming in economics.
Okay.
Let us say that Signature Television is worldwide, and the government says, look, we want you, since you have cameras, to be catching people and telling them to go and pay tax. In return, what you should do is to pay us 300 million. If you catch those people and collect 3 billion, take the difference. That's what happens. All these people you see on the road holding stick, stopping vehicles.
Touts.
Yes, they are not just touts. They are tax collectors on behalf of those to whom the government, local, states have farmed out. They have collected money up front from them. But they are usually members of their party. That's why when they kill somebody on the road, they cause accident, the governor or the chairman will say, I want you people to get out of the road. The next day you will see them because they are, their husband and wife.
What do you mean that by Nigeria does not have the capacity? I know with civil service it's easier to, take the taxes from source. But are you referring to private business owners? And transporters is easier because of the people you mentioned. What about the people in the market? What is the plan to collect taxes from people in the market, independent
That's what I'm
business
saying
people?
you that the government does not have the capacity. Because before you have capacity, you must have information. But because of the dependence on resources for government financing, like oil, the spot of oil revenue is so large that the people in government are happy enjoying the money. They don't want to do the hard work. Look at United States. All the effort that the president of the US is making to impose tariff is because he has information that companies like HP, companies like Rank Xerox, companies like GM, all of them are American companies, but they have plants in China. The Chinese don't buy their products. They make their own. So they re-import those products into the United States, which is the largest market in the world. And because they are American companies, they kept the tariff low. So the companies were enjoying, but American workers were suffering. Because American workers are paid more in America. So they go to China, where they pay workers less, and then re-import the product to the United States to sell to high consumers. So Trump is saying, I'm going to impose tariff. The United States, Mexico, and Canada have a common market agreement. Inside that agreement, it was agreed that no country should use forced labor or prisoners for production, or children. But in Mexico, prisoners, young children, are forced to work to produce goods. They also agreed not to allow third country products to enter their market. Canada, Mexico import Chinese components, put it in products they are selling to America without declaring it. Can you see that Trump has information? We didn't know that all our immunization was financed by USAID until he pulled the plug. Now the government says, we are going to hire about 800,000 people who were assumed to be government employees, but it was the US AID that was paying them. So he has information. But here we don't have information. If you want to get anything from the federal government, you have to go to Abuja or know somebody who is engaged there. But that is not the principle of federation. It should reach you everywhere. In state government, the same thing. That's why you find increasing urbanization. People move to the capitals in order to see the governor's face or the president's face and get something. Yesterday, the television was filled up with congratulations to Tinubu. But Buhari is there. Did you see any congratulations to him when he became... because he's no longer offering anything. He has nothing to offer. And I've not seen your birthday on television because you have no contract to award.
Okay, I get that. So you have been able to allude to the fact that investments actually have depleted, especially international investments. It has depleted over the years, maybe because of insecurity and other issues Nigeria has been having politically and otherwise. But as an economist, could you suggest a policy that could offer a change in the trajectory and of course boost international investment in Nigeria, be it a bill, a policy, or something that needs to be done, to just tweak the turn of events and change the trajectory of investment in Nigeria for the better?
Well, I think it's fancy economics to think that investors are going around the sea looking for where to
put their money.
No. When you support investment in your country, when your own people are investing, let's say this notebook is made in Nigeria. and Korean trade officers in their embassy in Nigeria go to the bookshop and see this and say, you can make something better. You say, which better? This one is made by Snap. It's the best company in Enugu. Say, no. We have something, a subsidiary of Hyundai that is in printing. Maybe I'll give you one copy of what they have. The man says it. He goes to Snap. Say, can you do this? Snap say, where will you get the machine? It's only in Korea. If there is effective demand, Snap will go to Korea and ask those people to come and partner with them. That's how it happens. And they will give them conditions. Then the government will give approval. They will bring in their money, bring in the machine, and participate. Nobody, except high-risk takers.
Yes, I was going to ask you.
Only high-risk takers.
They benefit in
what they do is that they come, they know who is the president or who is the governor. They go to him directly and say, can we do a deal? To use Trump's remarks. Can we do a deal? Yeah, we're going to bring this, bring that. Well, don't worry about your share. We will take care of it. If it requires going to prison, we will go to prison. Those people, they go to director of prisons, police leaders, army leaders, settle them. So whatever they do, you will see containers from the ports. If it belongs to their company, no policeman will stop them because they have been given instruction that once you see this, do not stop them. If you stop them, they will call the head of police and the policeman may be fired. But an honest businessman, his trailer will be taken to a police station, kept there for months. So if a businessman interested in doing business comes to Nigeria and goes around police stations in Nigeria and sees trucks, goods parked there, and you will ask, why are these things? They say, oh, okay, they are exhibits. For how long? It's been there for 4 years. What of the case in the court? We are still investigating. Will the person come there? He will not. So the facts on the ground does not support honest investment. And that's why you find that even in Nigeria, most well-educated people don't invest because they know the facts. They don't want to be humiliated. You don't want a policeman who is younger than your son to stop you and say, settle. So rather than that, now you just fold your arms. You go to church, you come back. Most businesses in Nigeria are owned by risk takers. Either they go to politics, use politics to hold the regulations, and then do business with government. When they are out of government, their business fails. That's why you see some of the hotels, they are empty when their owner is out of power. And when they're out of power, they go into a billboard praising the new man to see whether he can help them.
Interesting. Okay, let's talk about the IMF and the World Bank. There's this, a vicious cycle where third world countries, if I'm allowed to use that phrase, are lent money they're not able to pay, and then there are economic policies that are imposed on these countries by IMF and World Bank. Would you classify the World Bank and IMF as high-risk takers?
As
high-risk takers. You said...
No, the thing is that the World Bank and the IMF, Nigeria belonged to them voluntarily. It's not by force. Nigeria signed a memorandum to belong. First, the World Bank. The World Bank was formed after the Second World War as a development agency. It started in, suggesting developmental steps in South America, which was closer to Washington. Then, as we became independent, we signed on, and they had capacity to advise you on programs. Realistically, the bank should have stopped working after some time. But, organizations tend to persist. There are people who are working there, so they have transformed themselves into a development agency. Because the actual name was International Bank for Reconstruction and Development. Reconstruction arising from the Second World War, which has been completed in Europe. But now they have European Bank for Reconstruction and Development. They have the one in Africa, the one in Asia, and of course
African Development Bank. Okay.
No, African Development Bank is a different thing.
Okay.
There's a World Bank office in for Africa.
Okay.
Is based in I think Ethiopia or Kenya.
Okay.
That's where Ukeje was vice president for a while. Yeah.
Okay.
So if you belong to them, they lend you money. But some of their lendings have become, in my view, a little bit suboptimal because, like all this money that government is sharing, for the poor, for the this, they are the people that suggest it to the government. Have a register of poor people.
That is what I'm saying. Do you borrow to just give out money?
No, they give you money sometimes. There is a section of the World Bank called the International Development Association. Governments around the world contribute money to give either low interest or no interest money for such programs.
Okay.
But before they give you, they ask you to contribute. If they say Nigeria should bring in 50 million or billion, that they will match it with 30 billion so that you share it to the poor to maintain. They are working with an idea from the United States that consumption drives production. That when people are consuming, production will increase. But here there is no production. Then you empower people to consume. What they do is to consume foreign goods. And then the people who administer it become, they play God. They don't give it to everybody. They compile fictitious names, take the money. And the World Bank cannot supervise all those things. So it becomes an adverse incentive to production. The IMF was formed to maintain stability in exchange rates.
Economic stability?
No, stability in exchange rates.
Okay.
After the Second World War. Because before the Second World War, and part of what it cost the First and Second World War was what it was called beggar my neighbor. In other words, some countries were putting up tariff to prevent their people from importing, because at that time money was backed fully by gold. When you import, you will pay with gold. So to prevent their gold stock from depleting, they raised tariffs. And economists felt that restraint of trade was a cause of economic decline. And it was that economic decline that was creating agitation and causing war. So the United States, which was not affected in its own country by the Second World War, guaranteed that they will match every dollar with a specific weight of gold. So a gold standard was set up for exchange rates. That was why, when I was a child, the Nigerian pound was equivalent to the British pound and was stronger than the US dollar. But by 1971, because speculators came into the market and we are amassing dollars and collecting gold from the United States. So the US stock of gold was declining rapidly. So President Nixon said no more.
We will no longer exchange. The gold standard.
In other words, when that exchange rate mechanism ended, the IMF should have stopped working. But like I said, organizations persist. They now transform themselves to monitor economies, to see how their fiscal policy is helping or not helping their exchange rates. And that's where Nigeria comes in. When the government prints money, what we call government deficit, fiscal deficit, it stimulates imports.
But it also...
Because we don't have local production.
But it also enables inflation.
It's all part of it. It inflates the economy, and people who have that money either try to exchange it. You would have seen on television a man who was arrested at Lagos airport carrying $258,000 who fainted in the court. Good. How did he get the money? Some senators were giving 5,000 and 10,000. Some said it's for Salah. Some said it's for River State US dollars in Nigeria. Most banks and the central bank import fiscal dollars to meet needs. But I've never heard that the US Reserve Bank imported Naira to meet needs. So these deficits create imbalances in the economy. So when the IMF comes, it says, can we look at your books? It will advise that this thing you are doing is hurting your economy. But of course, we, the victims, shout that the IMF is telling us what not to do. But the IMF is like the headmaster. If he punishes students when they are misbehaving, parents will say the headmaster is wicked, he should be transferred. When he doesn't do anything and the children fail, the parents will come back. But why didn't you tell us that the children were not studying? What is cane? We were even caned in our own period. You should have caned them. So what will what's the balance? What will the headmaster do? So,
all right. So, Doctor, given the current political challenges we're having in Nigeria, in 5 years' time, what do you see as will become of Nigeria's economic outlook in 5 years' time? If what's happening continues, if we continue this particular trajectory, how do you see Nigeria's economy in the next 5 years?
The economy is already in the doldrums.
But it can get better, can't it?
It can't get better unless what is pushing it stops. And it cannot stop unless you have an appropriate structure.
Could you explain more?
Political structure.
Okay,
yeah,
political structure.
Let's take Enugu State.
Okay.
If you want to define Enugu State, you list all the towns that make up Enugu State. But if you ask children to in school to define Enugu State, they will name the local governments. But the local governments don't actually define the state because you were created.
Of the state.
Good. But if you say that there is Olo, Enugu Ezike, Egede, Ngwo, Nsude, if you say it now, many of the children they have not heard about Olo. If you say Ogunta, they'll say, I know of Ogu. There's no Ogunta. But if you listed them in a map, showing where they are, in the governor's office, you have a list of those towns and their map. I'm sure that when he's taking decision, he will be saying, what have we done for Ugoba? What have we done for Iminikago? Because you can't ignore it. That was why in the past, in the United States, all their courts had the 10 commandments in front of the judge. When you are judging, you say, are you right? Are you bearing false witness against your neighbor?
You know, going back to point to the information you talked about.
Of course. But here we suppress information. And that's why, Trump is like a sore thumb in the United States. Because he's asking them to go back to where they were before. You shouldn't be denying. You cannot say in your constitution that this is a country under God. And then you say, leave God alone.
Out of schools.
How can? So we can't get it right. All the state governors, they have congratulated the president on his birthday. They are assuming that they do it on behalf of the people of the states without telling them. Yeah.
All right. Thank you so much, Doctor. It's been very insightful talking with you, and I'm sure we have learned a thing or two from your insights. Thank you so much.
It's been my joy being with you.
Thank you. That's a good one. Thank you.
Save Nature TV. News in your pocket.